2020 was a shit year for everyone, but it was also kind of a shit year for movies too. A lot of major releases were postponed or cancelled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, there were still great movies, you just had to dig for them. So here it is, in my opinion, the best films of 2020. Just some notes before we get into this. This is my list. I don't care if a film is on everyone else's 2020 list, or if it won 1,000,000 Oscars, or if it has 101 Metascore. I'm only including films that I personally enjoy. I watched as many films as I reasonably could for this list. It's likely that there are some that I missed, but I don't want to spend the rest of my life watching 2020 films. Release dates can be annoying. Most movies get released on different dates for different countries. Some films mightn't get a wide release until a year after their premiere. You could argue that some films are 2019 releases and that others are 2021 releases, but I tried to keep it as consistent as possible. And with all that, here are what I consider to be every great film released in 2020. We're going to start with honorable mentions, which is reserved for short films, miniseries, general miscellanea, and any film that I thought was worth recommending, but not good enough to include on the actual list. In no particular order, we're going to start off with The Cure, directed by Ahmed Adelaide. This is an action short film made with a $15,000 budget and a 3-person crew. While it's certainly rough around the edges, the level of proficiency displayed is astounding. The filmmakers demonstrate a firm grasp on editing, visual effects, cinematography, and sound design, which is impressive given their resources. The behind-the-scenes footage is almost as interesting as the film itself, since you can see how they utilize their restraints to their advantage. I would love to see what these guys would do with an actual Hollywood budget. I would hope that they would retain the same level of creativity as they did here. Next up is The Human Voice, directed by Pedro Almodovar, who is best known for directing The Skin I Live In, Talk to Her, and All About My Mother. This is a short film starring Tilda Swinton. The short exists in a surreal, non-literal reality with exposed sets, while Tilda Swinton recites what could be described as a cryptic poem. It's weird, it's hypnotic, and it's esoteric. It's not going to be for everyone, but I enjoyed this. Next we have World of Tomorrow Episode 3, The Absent Destinations of David Prime, directed by Don Hertzfeldt. This is the third installment of Don Hertzfeldt's World of Tomorrow trilogy, so by recommending this, I'm also recommending the other two by default. Don Hertzfeldt is best well known for being the director of It's Such a Beautiful Day and Rejected. This short presents a morbidly bleak dystopian future with mind-bending sci-fi concepts. It isn't all gloom, as there are some sprinklings of dry humour to be found. Despite how simple the character designs are, this short is impressively ambitious, as it's both endlessly creative and hard-hitting emotionally. It simultaneously feels like an exaggeration, but also a reflection of the not-too-distant future. Next we have Tiger King, directed by Eric Goode and Rebecca Chaiklin. You all know what this is. Chances are you've probably seen it before. This documentary miniseries takes many outrageous twists and turns, since every single subject is out of their minds. Every subject is larger than life, almost to an unbelievable degree. This miniseries pumps up the sensationalism at the expense of realism. It puts forward some speculations that don't make sense once you start to contemplate them. Regardless, the show gets by purely because of how insane the story is. Even though it's like junk food, it's still one of the most entertaining and fascinating miniseries out there. Another honorable mention is a short film called Digital Video Editing with Adobe Premiere Pro, The Real World Guide to Setup and Workflow. Yes, that's the real title, directed by Hong Xiong-yoon. I don't want to give away too much about this since it's full of surprises. All I'll say is that it's a screen life type film, in a similar vein to Unfriended and Searching. It manages to be satirical, introspective, and meta. There's so much more going into this that I'm not revealing because it's best to go in blind. This is a must-watch. Next up is 846, directed by Stephen Bogner and Julia Reichert. Now, I know that Dave Chappelle has gone on to make some inexcusable and mean-spirited comments at the expense of trans people, so I understand if someone wants to avoid this because of him. Unfortunately, someone with a shitty view can also have some insightful things to say about other topics. Chappelle delivers a raw diatribe about the murder of George Floyd and the societal implications surrounding it. It's not a traditional stand-up routine, since what Chappelle is doing is closer to soapboxing than it is to comedy. This was also one of the first live events to take place after the start of the coronavirus pandemic, making this a perfect encapsulation of what 2020 was like. Great short, not so great person. Alright, no more Dave Chappelle. Next is Coming Out, directed by Cressa Maeve Anya, also known as Cressa Maeve Beer. This is a 2-minute stop-motion animated film featuring Godzilla action figures. I think you can guess what this is about based on the title and poster. As simple and as brief as this short is, it's effectively resonant because it clearly comes from an authentic place. It features some impressive animation, which is rare to see in something that appears to be a homemade project. My only complaint is how short this is. I wish there was more, although with how direct and to the point it is, it doesn't really need to be any longer. Next up is an ongoing TV series that debuted in 2020 called Smiling Friends. This is an animated adult comedy series from Zach Hadel, also known as Psychic Pebbles, and Michael Cusick, who are both known for their respective online presences. This show is a breath of fresh air in the animated comedy realm. It utilizes animation to its fullest extent, injecting as many styles and details as possible into every frame. This show is so chaotic and morbid and weird, but on top of everything, it's also very, very funny. As of recording this, Season 2 is still being released, and it's great from what I've seen so far. And lastly, for the honourable mentions, is Red Moon Tide, directed by Lois Patino. This film has an unconventional, minimalist execution. Movement is kept to a minimum for both the camera and the images it captures. It renders the film to appear like a series of still images. The detailed, textured sound design and vivid cinematography make this a haunting experience. The reason why this is an honourable mention is because I think that its style is unconventional to a fault. I really wish there was more going on with the story. It tends to get fairly repetitive, and it makes me think it would have functioned much better as a short film. Lois Patino has such an immediately recognisable and memorable approach that I think this film deserves a mention, even if I'm not totally enamoured by the entire thing. Alright, on to the actual list now. At number 34 is Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, directed by Eliza Hittman. This film follows a teenage girl as she travels to New York City in order to secretly seek out a legal abortion. It's an incredibly harrowing and emotional film with a powerful performance by Sidney Flanagan. The reason why this is so low on this list is that I think a lot of it is inconsistent. I think some parts of this are deeply effective, whereas other parts feel corny. Some conflicts are painfully real, while others feel forced. I wish this film was more consistent because the things that I like about it are truly amazing. Some people will resonate with this film more than myself. Still though, this is a fantastic film with an important subject matter that deserves a place on this list. At number 33 is The Mole, Undercover in North Korea. This documentary sees controversial filmmaker Mads Brugger execute a daring 10-year-long operation to infiltrate the inner circles of North Korea. This film is a follow-up to his 2010 documentary, The Red Chapel. While I personally prefer The Red Chapel, this film is vastly different in terms of tone and production value. Everyone involved has to be completely insane, because they essentially risk their lives in order to expose information on North Korea's global reach. This film is a nightmare when it comes to ethics. Like, it probably shouldn't have even been made. While it doesn't blow the lid off of Kim Jong-un's regime, it offers a glimpse into the malicious dealings that go on behind closed doors. It's as close to a real-life spy thriller as we're ever going to get. A totally fascinating and provocative film. At number 32 is Los Conductos, directed by Camilo Restrepo. This is a film where aesthetics is everything. It's presented to appear like a weathered, low-budget film from the 70s. Parts of this are clunky and stiff and rough around the edges. However, this unpolished presentation adds to the film in multiple ways. It allows the filmmakers to overcome the restraints of their obviously small budget and tell a story much larger than itself. It gave the filmmakers opportunities to take creative liberties with the film. There's a scene in this with purposefully bad acting. It creates such a vivid and hypnotic atmosphere that I found this to be an engaging watch. This might not be for everyone, but the striking imagery and incredibly short runtime made this a worthwhile watch. At number 31 is Welcome to Chechnya, directed by David France. This is one of the most harrowing films on this list. It's a documentary about an underground organization that helps LGBTQ+ people flee Russia in order to escape persecution. It's a difficult film to recommend because it features footage of actual hate crimes that include assault, torture, murder, and other things that I don't even want to say. This doesn't pull any punches, and it would be a mistake to approach this film as entertainment. Needless to say, this film is immensely bleak. The faces of people seeking asylum are obscured using AI, and it's surprisingly well done. It isn't distracting, and you wouldn't notice that their faces were altered straight away. It allows their humanity to poke through, which couldn't be accomplished by simply blurring their faces. I'm largely against AI in art. This is a conversation for another time, but this film uses it to achieve something that couldn't be accomplished otherwise. With how heavy this film is, I think that it can sometimes mishandle its subject matter. There's a real-life suicide attempt shown in this, and the way it's depicted could be called journalistic malpractice. Like, the last thing you should do is show a suicide attempt in full detail. That's just gross and dangerous. Criticisms aside, this is a sobering, unsettling film and an important reminder of the evils that still exist in this world. Exercise caution when watching this film because it can be distressing for a lot of people. At number 30 is yet another disturbing film, Caught in the Net, directed by Vit Klusak and Barbara Chalupova. This film can be described as To Catch a Predator on steroids, and that might be the most apt description for this. This film follows a similar formula to that show, using adult women to pose as teenagers in order to document the depraved individuals who reach out to them. However, this film takes it to a completely different level. It is absolutely disturbing and eye-opening. It offers a glimpse into the behavior of some of the most vile people who exist online. While it's not for the faint of heart, this film bluntly demonstrates just how dangerous social media can be. At number 29 is Fireball, Visitors from Darker Worlds, directed by Werner Herzog and Clive Oppenheimer. This is a nature documentary that explores how meteorites have shaped human culture. It's narrated by Werner Herzog, who adds some humorous observations. He seems weirdly irreverent toward the subject despite being a co-director. This film is loaded with fascinating information, covering a multitude of topics related to space rocks. It has some gorgeous looking shots, and I cannot emphasize enough how funny Herzog is. At number 28 is Rising Phoenix, directed by Peter Tidge and Ian Bonhote. Unfortunately, this film has a pretty obnoxious presentation. It's so overblown and overproduced that it nearly ruins the film for me. However, this film is on this list for a reason, and it's because of its subject matter. The documentary examines the history of the Paralympic Games, not just as a sports competition, but as a cultural phenomenon. This film is an endlessly compelling film that's filled with subjects who are easy to root for. Behind its obnoxious presentation is an emotional and inspirational film. It's obvious that this film was released to coincide with the 2020 Paralympics, but COVID ruined that. I would recommend this film to almost anyone. At number 27 is Saint Maud, directed by Rose Glass, who recently directed Love Lies Bleeding. This is a patient, artfully presented horror film. It manages to build a strong atmosphere with its visuals and music, making it one of the most effectively unsettling films that I've seen. This film explores ideas of religious fanaticism, taking the concept of devotion to a truly disturbing degree. With how striking the cinematography, score, and performances are, it is a genuine shock that this was Rose Glass' feature-length debut. It has a brisk runtime, and it's one of the few horror films to actually scare me. At number 26 is Small Axe, directed by Steve McQueen, who also directed Hunger, Shame, 12 Years a Slave, and Widows. Don't tell anyone, but I'm actually recommending you 5 movies in place of 1. That's right, 5 for the price of 1. You wouldn't get a deal like that from Chris Stuckman. Small Axe is an anthology series directed by Steve McQueen, who is one of my favourite directors working today. These are 5 films about the West Indian community in London from the 60s to the 80s. The films range from an hour to 2 hours in length, so it's a digestible experience. There are a lot of impassioned performances, biting political statements, and moments of harrowing violence. This anthology is slick, stylish, and emotional. While the quality across the 5 films isn't totally consistent, each film is certainly deserving of your time. At number 25 is Dear Comrades, directed by Andrei Konchalovsky, who also wrote Ivan's Childhood and Andrei Rublev. This film tells the story of the Novocherkassk massacre of 1962. It has some impeccably directed scenes that are captured through stunning black and white photography. It sometimes feels like a film from the 60s. It has some unflinchingly brutal scenes of violence, plus moments that are steeped in dread. This film is viscerally resonant, meticulously made, and has a stunning lead performance from Yulia Vysotskia. At number 24 is The Wolf of Snow Hollow, directed by Jim Cummings. Jim Cummings is one of the indie scene's best kept secrets. He isn't just a director, he's an actor, writer, producer, editor, composer, and even a visual effects artist. Needless to say, Cummings clearly has a passion for filmmaking, and that passion can be seen in his films. The Wolf of Snow Hollow sees Cummings tackle a horror murder mystery. His debut, Thunder Road, is one of the most underrated films of the 2010s. While this film has a noticeably small budget, it's made up for with its creative ambition. There are some impressive long takes in this film that go on for minutes at a time. The writing features some deeply layered characters, with Cummings delivering a nuanced, multifaceted performance in the lead. Despite being something of a generic film, the story takes some unique directions that I found to be refreshing. Not to mention how many genres were loaded into this thing. You've got horror, drama, crime, mystery, thriller, and even comedy. Much like Cummings himself, this film does it all, and it does it all so well. At number 23 is Borat Subsequent Moviefilm, directed by Jason Walliner. You all know who Borat is. This is the sequel to one of the most iconic and outrageous comedy films of the 2000s. This film had a lot to live up to, and it succeeded. Now, I don't think this film is as good as the likes of Borat or Bruno, but it's definitely much better than a lot of other belated sequels. I think that Sacha Baron Cohen is seriously one of the best actors working today, with how he's able to successfully convince others into thinking his characters are real people, not to mention the amount of skillful improv required. This film features Maria Bakalova as Borat's daughter, and it could have easily ended in disaster. However, not only was Bakalova able to pull it off, she actually outshines Cohen here. She's able to ham up her performance to ridiculous levels, but is still able to make it convincing. This film centers more on contemporary American politics, especially the 2020 presidential election, and the zeitgeist surrounding it. It could be a legitimate concern that this film might not age as well as the original film, since it firmly cements itself in a specific time and place. Regardless, I think this film will function as a time capsule, giving a glimpse into just how divided, chaotic, and unstable that year was. At number 22 is a film whose full name I'm not going to say, so I'm just going to call it A Disability Revolution, directed by Nicole Newnham and James Lebrecht. This documentary follows the history of disability civil rights activism. It covers a part of history that I think is often overlooked. It's hard to imagine that there was once a time where disability-friendly infrastructure was something people had to fight for. This film is funny, inspiring, and invigorating. The subjects it follows are all immensely watchable and are full of personality. This is a film that I could recommend to almost anyone. At number 21 is Identifying Features, directed by Fernanda Valadez. This is the feature-length debut of Fernanda Valadez, and with how much intent and prowess was put into it, she has a promising career ahead of her. This film looks fantastic, with natural lighting used in dramatic ways. There's one instance of a shot being purposefully out of focus, which greatly adds to the experience. This film has this stylish presentation where the camera will be fixed in place during conversations, with only one actor in frame and the other out of frame. This allows us to watch the in-frame actor's emotions develop naturally over the scene. Plus, there's thematic relevance to us not being able to see the other actor, which I won't spoil. The story is dramatic and intense, with an immensely impactful ending. It's a shame that not enough people know about this film. At number 20 is About Endlessness, directed by Roy Andersson. This is an unconventional, borderline experimental film. It's a series of vignettes that are connected in the loosest way possible. Some of them don't even have any relation with each other whatsoever. Each vignette is shot in a single take from an unmoving camera. Some of them only last a few seconds. It's basically a few steps away from being a series of photographs. Each vignette has a surreal quality to it. Nearly every scene seems to have been shot on an overcast day, which softens the lighting and prevents the characters from casting shadows. This is combined with a heavily desaturated color palette, resulting in a weirdly artificial feeling film that's very, very, very grey. I can imagine some people being dissatisfied with this film, since many of the vignettes can be anticlimactic or may simply show the aftermath of a dramatic event. However, I love this film, especially for its sense of humour. It's very dry and awkward like a Coen Brothers film. This film is also wildly unpredictable, since you never know which direction any given vignette will take. There's so much detail tucked away into the corner of each frame, which helps liven up the world of the film. If you're looking for something strange, meditative and surreal, or if you just really love the colour grey, then give this a watch. At number 19 is 76 Days, directed by Wei-Shi Chen, Hao Wu and Anonymous. This documentary delivers a first-hand account of what the medical staff and patients in Wuhan had to go through during the first few months of the COVID-19 pandemic. It has an extremely blunt, matter-of-fact presentation that heightens its impact. Lots of stressful, anxiety-inducing scenes that are contrasted by moments of human compassion. There isn't really much else to say about it because this film speaks for itself. At number 18 is The Reason I Jump, directed by Jerry Rothwell. This documentary is adapted from a book of the same name by nonverbal autistic teenager Naoki Higashida. This film, like the book, attempts to dismantle the misconceptions surrounding nonverbal autism. This documentary is beautifully shot with an entrancing use of sound. It creates a powerful audio experience by enhancing the sound effects of things that would usually be easy to ignore. Each of its subjects are deeply compelling, giving a broad view on how autism can affect people in different ways. It isn't perfect, and even the film itself acknowledges that it couldn't possibly give a comprehensive depiction of what every single instance of autism is like. However, I think this film would be eye-opening for a lot of people, since the perspectives it offers help to smash all stigma. At number 17 is Last and First Men, directed by Jóhann Jóhannsson. This is the first and only feature film to be directed by the late Icelandic composer Jóhann Jóhannsson. Originally a multimedia project, Jóhannsson's work was adapted for the screen after his untimely death with the help of sound artist Geir Elazar Glotman. This film is part radio play, part music album, and part photo gallery. The film consists of a series of shots of these unearthly concrete structures set to atmospheric music, all the while Tilda Swinton narrates about life 2 billion years in the future. There are no characters and the story is told exclusively through narration. The structures in question are huge and don't even seem to have any obvious function. They loom over the camera with bizarre angles and contours. Sometimes we'll only see a small portion of a structure. They already look alien, but by zooming in on them, their purpose is only further obscured. You're forced to imagine what the rest of it looks like, how big it is, what function it may even have. This forces the audience to use their imagination, which is similar to how the narration is utilized, since none of what is described is even visualized. If you like experimental, unique, atmospheric films, then this is for you. At number 16 is Another Round, directed by Thomas Vinterberg, which took home the Academy Award for Best International Feature Film. This dark comedy reunites Thomas Vinterberg with Mads Mikkelsen, who previously collaborated together on one of my all-time favourite movies, The Hunt. This film is much more light-hearted when compared to The Hunt, but still doesn't shy away from upsetting scenes either. The story is about a group of high school teachers who test out a hypothesis that having a constant blood alcohol level will make their lives more enriched. This film is largely a commentary on Danish drinking culture, where the legal age of alcohol consumption is 16, which is why the American remake is going to suck. The American drinking age is 21. The two countries' drinking cultures are incomparable. The core of the film is going to be gutted. Anyway, this is a darkly fun comedy drama with humorous characters and scenarios. I also really love the ending. Enjoy this film with a cold, responsible beer. At number 15 is Slalom, directed by Charlene Favier. This is a slow burn drama about the relationship between a determined skiing prodigy and her mentor. This film packs a lot into its short runtime. I could go on for ages about how the snowy landscapes were used to enhance the lighting. The skiing scenes were somehow shot up close and personal, meaning that they must have had the cameraman slide downhill with a rig to follow the stunt person. This would have required insane amounts of coordination, and the result helps immerse the audience into the breakneck speeds the characters are travelling at. The centre of this film are its characters and their relationship. This is like a less aggressive but much more sinister incarnation of Whiplash. The story heads down some truly distressing paths, so I wouldn't recommend it to everyone. The thoughtful writing and impassioned performances give the characters lots of nuances, which had me thinking about this film for days after I had seen it. Watch this if you want something subtle, intelligent, and challenging. At number 14 is There Is No Evil, directed by Mohammad Rasoulouf. This is an Iranian anthology film comprising of 4 short stories, with each one being centered around the death penalty. This film is currently banned in Iran for being critical of its government, and Rasoulouf has been jailed numerous times over the course of his career for the content of his films. This film brings together a wide variety of emotions and styles, meaning it never stagnates over its gigantic 2.5-hour long runtime. Some patience is required, but it will be rewarded with 4 excellently written dramas. Despite the anthology centering around a single topic, each segment is able to find a unique and dramatic take on the matter. It's masterfully crafted, with invigorating performances, captivating cinematography, and punchy editing. Parts of this are so intense that they left a pit at the bottom of my stomach. Don't let the long runtime and slow pacing put you off. At its center is a surprisingly straightforward and accessible film, with some deeply affecting characters and stories. At number 13 is The Painter and the Thief, directed by Benjamin Ree. Like the title suggests, this documentary follows a painter named Barbara Kisilkova and a thief named Karl Bertil Nordland. It almost plays out like a scripted narrative. The 2 lead subjects and the series of events that surround them feel larger than life. There are some moments that are so intimate that I have no idea how or why Kisilkova or Nordland allowed them to be filmed. This is essentially a character study of 2 strange but highly charismatic people and their unusual friendship. It's unusual because they meet when Nordland steals the paintings of Kisilkova. They have every right to be each other's sworn enemy, but instead we get to see them develop a close bond together. The story of this documentary takes various twists and turns, so I won't give much away. The duo are so compelling that I could honestly watch an entire series centered around them. At number 12 is The Truffle Hunters, directed by Michael Dweck and Gregory Kershaw. A short and simple documentary about the Italian men who search for truffles for a living. It's beautifully shot, with its compositions, lighting, and colours being reminiscent of those of a painting. Its offbeat comedy, quirky subjects, and striking style make it comparable to a Wes Anderson film. There are parts of this film that play out as though they were staged. The subjects behave so naturally, but the camera and lighting seem to anticipate them. Were these scenes scripted for dramatic effect? Were they captured on the fly? Were they reenactments of events that actually happened? Regardless, I think this semi-staged, semi-candid style makes this film stand out. The subjects all have endearing personalities that make them fun characters to watch. The world of the truffle trade is presented as an insular yet intimate ecosystem, allowing you to glimpse into a culture that's hidden away in the forests of northern Italy. Also, they put a GoPro on a dog and it's one of the greatest things ever. Give this a watch if you like idiosyncratic documentaries, films about food, or if you just simply like dogs. At number 11 is An Evening with Tim Heidecker, directed by Ben Berman. Maybe you could argue that this should have been in the honorable mention segment because it's not a conventional film. But I don't care, this is my list. I think this stand-up routine, satire, performance art, character study, whatever you want to call it, is substantial enough to be placed at number 11 on this list. This thing sees legendary comedian Tim Heidecker from Tim and Eric fame perform a stand-up routine as an exaggerated version of himself. Here he parodies lazy, conservative comic personas by delivering some of the most uncreative jokes he can muster. This isn't funny in the traditional sense, but rather it's funny because it's not funny. This thing is covered in countless layers of irony. The entire routine is Heidecker crashing down in flames, all the while projecting his frustrations onto the audience in a near psychotic rage. There is a palpable sense of hostility radiating from Heidecker. It's the stand-up equivalent of being held hostage. This thing is a public execution of an outdated version of comedy, making it embarrassing that these types of routines are still being released. I could go on about all the subtle details that are sprinkled throughout about Heidecker's character's backstory, but for now, all I'll say is that this is one of the sharpest and smartest pieces of comedy that I've ever seen.
Shut the fuck up!
Alright, so now we're into the top 10. At number 10 is The Climb, directed by Michelangelo Covino. This is a fairly standard Sundance indie comedy drama for the most part. However, there are several aspects that make this remarkable. First of all, you have the story, which is a compelling drama with two endlessly watchable leads. I love the various twists and turns the story takes, and I love how the two leads' relationship is constantly evolving over the course of the film. Secondly, there's the performances. Gail Rankin stands out here and establishes herself as one of the most underappreciated actors working today. The leads offer a wide range of emotion and are able to balance the comedic moments and dramatic moments without either tone interfering with each other. Thirdly, this film is presented in a series of long takes. Each scene plays out as an elaborate, carefully coordinated oneer that will go on for minutes at a time. These long takes aren't just a gimmick, instead they actively enhance the film. They allow the actors to naturally interact with each other. Over the course of each scene, we get to see their emotions gradually develop before our eyes. These long takes are also impressive on a technical level, with insanely ambitious camera movements that would have been extremely difficult to capture. Everyone here went above and beyond with what was expected of them. This is a hilarious, intimate, and honest film with deeply layered characters. The long takes are just a cherry on top. At number 9 is This Is Not a Burial, It's a Resurrection, directed by Lemohang Jeremiah Mosese. This is easily the best looking film on this list. It looks pristinely beautiful. The color blue has never looked so intense. There's a shot of a pile of ash, like a pile of dirt, and it's one of the most magnificently beautiful shots that I've ever seen. The lighting and shot compositions are just so vivid that they radiate out of the screen. Beyond that, even aspects like frame rate and depth of field are used to enhance the imagery. Similarly, this film might have the best score on this list. Yu Miyashita's score is this hauntingly ethereal composition with these glitchy, dissonant drones, organs, and strings. It sounds otherworldly, ghostly, and apocalyptic. It even gives some slight Tim Heidecker vibes. Needless to say, this film offers a profoundly affecting audiovisual experience. The story is a bit familiar, being about a rural village in Lesotho being asked to relocate to make way for the construction of a dam. This causes an elderly widow to fight back. However, this familiarity is thematically purposeful, as the film is about how history repeats itself. This film features some meticulous directing with carefully composed details scattered throughout the film. Its thick atmosphere, slow pacing, stunning visuals, and philosophical ponderings all make the film feel like a modern iteration of Andrei Tarkovsky. This is not going to be for everyone, but I would still urge everyone to at least give this film a chance. At number 8 is The Father, directed by Florian Zeller. This film is incredibly heartbreaking, but also expertly made. It took home 2 Academy Awards, one for adapted screenplay, and the other went to Anthony Hopkins for his lead performance, both of which were well deserved. Anthony Hopkins delivers what could be a career best performance here. He is absolutely outstanding. The amount of emotion and frailty that he's able to bring to the character is just devastating. I would probably consider it to be the best performance of 2020. Not to mention, Olivia Colman does an excellent job too. This film is presented from the perspective of someone suffering from dementia, so it's purposefully disorienting and even nightmarish. The way the filmmakers accomplished this, through the sets, dialogue, and editing, leaves a lot of details to be picked up on through multiple viewings. This is a deeply moving film on an emotional level and utterly impressive on a technical one. At number 7 is Feels Good Man, directed by Arthur Jones. What's this? Why is he recommending a documentary about the silly internet frog meme? Yes, this film is about Pepe the Frog, but it is also so much more than that. I can't even begin to describe just how expansive, eye-opening, and entertaining this film is. This film chronicles the history of Pepe, from his innocent origins to ultimately being officially recognized as a hate symbol. The film documents the attempts of Matt Fury, Pepe's creator, at reclaiming his creation after it spiraled out of his control. By exploring the history of Pepe, the film simultaneously explores the history of internet culture in a refreshingly in-depth and authentic way. The amount of fascinating topics this film covers are nearly endless. It explores how the internet has completely reshaped modern politics and culture, how anonymity has made the internet a bottomless pit of depravity, how ironic humor can be used to mask genuine hate speech, how online attitudes can leak into the real world, and how little authorial control an artist has over the meaning of their work. This honestly might be one of the best explorations of Barthes' Death of the Author that I've ever seen. This film leaves a lot of material for you to think about, and it's all done with a striking visual flair. On top of everything this film accomplishes, it's also a great documentary about an internet frog meme. At number 6 is The Assistant, directed by Kitty Green. This film is all about subtlety. The film explores an abusive workplace environment, but the story itself takes place entirely off-screen, with only hints of it being observed by the protagonist, who is merely a background character to these events. This film is a slow but steady build-up of tension and inescapable dread. Each interaction, no matter how minor, leaves massive implications about the characters. The realistic sound design adds to the atmosphere and acts in place of the absent score. Like the characters, the cinematography is cold and impersonal, but it's also claustrophobic. Some line deliveries can cause your stomach to flip. The way Julia Garner suppresses her emotions is painfully intense, like watching someone try to keep a door shut with their body weight. Everything about this film is suffocating. It evokes numbing feelings of helplessness and powerlessness. This film takes obvious inspiration from Jeanne Dielman and has a similar approach to storytelling as last year's The Zone of Interest. This is such an intelligent, challenging film that can leave a lasting impact despite being so traditionally uneventful. At number 5 is Collective, directed by Alexander Nanau. Here we have my documentary of the year. This film follows sports journalist Catalan Tolatan as he investigates the aftermath of a tragic nightclub fire in Romania, where the number of survivors dying in the hospitals seemed unusually disproportionate to what was expected. As the investigation uncovers more information, a gigantic, bottomless rabbit hole opens up and consumes the whole country. I don't want to give away too much because it's best to go into this film knowing as little as possible. This film is intense, jaw-dropping, and disturbing. You essentially end up watching people trying to navigate through a living nightmare that spirals more and more out of control as each day passes. There are parts of this film that have shaken me to my core, and I think this is one of the most compelling documentaries that I've ever seen. At number 4 is my animated film of the year, being Wolfwalkers, directed by Tom Moore and Ross Stewart, and produced by Cartoon Saloon. This film proves that kids' movies don't have to be devoid of artistry. This film uses animation to its fullest extent. The colors and lighting are so vivid that they're indescribable. Even the shapes of characters and objects complement and contrast with each other, which make for some stunning compositions. The film is presented in such a way where the perspective is flattened, with a warped sense of depth. Not only is it visually striking, but it helps pack the frame with details that normally wouldn't be visible. There are sequences where an alternate visual style was used, which only makes the film more immersive. The film even uses aspect ratio changes to heighten the dramatic moments. What makes this film truly stand out is the story. It's so rare to see a kids' film with actual stakes and consequences. Each conflict feels like a natural progression, while also being the most satisfying direction the story could take. The story gradually snowballs, so that by the end it's able to deliver on an experience that I've never really seen from a kids' movie before. It has intense action, great music, and fun characters. The whole thing flies by. Compared to how generic and soulless and lazy most animated kids films tend to be, this film is a genuine diamond in the rough. At number 3 is Beginning, directed by Dia Columbagashvili. This is Columbagashvili's first feature film, making it one of the most impressive debuts in recent years. There are parts of this film that I would call masterful. I could go on for an hour talking about how much I love the opening scene and how insanely meticulous it is. I can only guess at how they achieved it. This is a cold, brutal, Michael Haneke-inspired drama. I would have to issue a content warning because this film features some truly unflinchingly violent scenes, so make sure you're in the right headspace to view something distressing first. This film is full of ambiguity, almost to a frustrating degree, but the more I let it sit with me, the more purpose that I'm able to parse from it. Shot in 35mm Academy ratio format, this film creates a tight, claustrophobic space to entrap the characters. The camera is rigid and unmoving, causing certain events to take place off-screen, which alters our perception of them. The film's patient, long takes create a hypnotic experience that draws you in and forces you to contemplate every pixel on the screen. This film is just loaded with details and purpose. I'm still struggling to wrap my head around how borderline perfectionist this film is, from the technical aspects to the performances to the subtext. This film deserves multiple watches. At number 2 is Sound of Metal. This is the debut feature film of Darius Marder, who is known for writing The Place Beyond the Pines. This film follows a drummer played by Riz Ahmed, whose life becomes upended when he suddenly loses his ability to hear. This film fills me with such a palpable mixture of emotions that it's hard to describe. There are parts of this film that have me wrought with anxiety, but then there are parts that are genuinely uplifting. I know it's a cliche, but this film really is a roller coaster of emotion for me. Riz Ahmed has always been a great supporting actor, but here he demonstrates his capabilities as a leading man. There are parts of Ahmed's performance where you can tell his character is terrified, yet is trying to contain it. It feels too real. There is so much range and nuance and emotion and personality going into this lead performance that I would consider Ahmed to be one of the best actors working today because of it. This film won the Academy Awards for Best Editing and for Best Sound. The editing is clean and sharp, with it being used to convey information in a direct manner. There's one cut in this film that is so impactful that it knocked the wind out of my stomach. The sound design is a highlight. I've never really seen sound be utilized in the way it is in this film. We essentially get to hear scenes from the perspective of the character, so like instead of point of view shots we get point of hearing scenes. It's a deeply immersive way of getting the audience to relate to what the protagonist is going through. Not only that, but the sound design itself is so rich and detailed, and on top of everything else, the way sound is used adds to the film on a thematic level too. I find this film to be absolutely devastating, but it's also intimate, inspiring, and even therapeutic. It features one of my favourite endings of all time. I absolutely adore this film, and I think it is just utterly incredible and moving and special. And this could have easily have been my number 1 film of 2020, but there's one more film that I had to put over it. And so my favourite film of 2020 is I'm Thinking of Ending Things, directed by Charlie Kaufman. I love every film Kaufman has written and directed, so I knew I was going to like this film. I knew it was going to be good, but I never in a million years could have anticipated how good this film would be. I don't think I could do this film justice here, because there's so much I can talk about that it would actually take hours. This is a film that deserves a frame-by-frame analysis. Everything that I love about films and filmmaking was done to perfection here. The performances are outstanding. Jessie Buckley displays an insane amount of range. There's a tense uneasiness to Jesse Plemons, there's a painfully lifelike frailty to David Thewlis, and the strained nervousness of Toni Collette. The cinematography is stark and beautiful, but is tinged with a lurking sense of dread. The editing is abrupt and disorienting, but is also loaded with purpose. I could go on about just about every other aspect to this film. The story is purposefully impenetrable. Even by the end, things aren't even made much clearer. However, this film has countless layers to it that are waiting to be uncovered. Throwaway lines of dialogue are enlaced with meaning. Little details are hidden everywhere within the frame. Every time I watch it, I discover something new about it. And this isn't just a simple Easter egg hunt. The actual hidden story behind all these layers is just emotionally devastating. It explores a part of the human psyche that is so personal and is so intimate that I never even recognized that this part of myself even existed. so it was straight up mind-blowing to see it explored on screen with such accuracy. In a way, this film knew me better than I knew myself. Again, there is so much more going on in this film that I could be here for days. This is one of the few films that I would call profound, and it is unquestionably deserving of this #1 spot. So that does it for my best of 2020 list. I think there's something for everyone here. You can find the full list on my Letterboxd page. Obviously, as years go by, opinions change, so I'll try to update the list accordingly. Do you think there's anything I missed? For now, I'm satisfied with this list, and I hope that you find something you'll like on it.